off with the one and only Mr. Leon Gulam. Over to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Vanessa, and thank you to Vanessa and to Pavan for inviting me to come and share my story with you all. I'm really pleased to be here and celebrating South Asian Heritage Month. So I'm just going to share my slides. Just bear with me 2 ticks. Oops, wrong one. Wrong one again. Just bear with me again. Sorry, got so many things open on my. There we go. Right. Can you all see that? Okay, so just go to. So this is my story. So my name's Leon Gulam, and I work at the moment in the ICB, so the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Integrated Care Board, as the Race Equality Programme lead, where I work with Pavan. Now, if you look beyond my name and my Twitter handle there, you'll see some lovely greenery and a beautiful hill. Now, this is Pendle Hill, which is played a pivotal part and a really majestic feature of the area where I grew up in the northwest of England. But we'll come on to that in just a moment. So, picture of me with my granddad here. I'm aged, I think, probably 2 or 3 here. And my granddad there, whose name was Peter, came to this country on his own in the early 60s, eventually settling in Lancashire, which is in the northwest of England, where there's an increasing number of South Asian immigrants, mainly due to the amount of sort of a term which I don't really like using, but unskilled work that was available there. Factories, mills formed a large sort of proportion of that unskilled work, but also the affordability of the area. Interestingly, his youngest son, my uncle, was born just after he left for England, leaving Pakistan for England. And the first time he actually met his son was when his son was 5. So, you know, it just gives you an idea of the commitment there was there, but also the challenges and what people had to give up to try and move to other places to lead a better life for themselves, but ultimately, and more importantly, for their families. My family are Catholic. They go to church every Sunday, which is a great way to integrate into the community and society. And whilst we didn't have much growing up as children, we never felt like we were missing out. You know, we had some really good times with big, colourful weddings, fantastic music and great food, brilliant Christmas parties, and so on and so forth, as part of a growing Asian Christian community in that particular area. But ultimately from a very young age, it was instilled into us that hard work and education was the key to getting forward in life. And we had to work harder than anybody else had to get to that same level. So some more photos of me growing up here. So the top left, you've got a very typical 1980s family photo. You've got my parents, you've got my older sister, Samantha, my younger brother, Sonny, there. I think this is Christmas 1987, judging by the 8-year-old badge on my sister there. At the top right there, you've got me on my graduation day in 2004 outside Bristol Cathedral with my grandma. And then bottom left, which is Pendle Hill. I referred to Pendle Hill earlier. It's very famous for witch trials and subsequent executions of innocent women in the 1600s. Something to Google for some interesting stories, if you like. And then at the bottom right, you've got a photograph of me, very typical photograph of me playing cricket or sport and just out being very active, cheeky smile. And these are those sort of good times growing up that I had. There were absolutely significant challenges though growing up. And each one of these photos will also represent challenges that we had or times that where I faced challenges. And just to give you a bit of an idea, you know, we faced violence, people wanting to fight us, set their dogs on us, putting cigarettes out us on the school bus, all because we were in the wrong place at the right time. But more importantly, we had the wrong skin color for the area. The National Front was a very active group in as I was growing up in that area. So, you know, behind every picture, I think there's a deeper story that can be told. I decided at the age of 15 that I wanted to be a physiotherapist, mainly because of my passion for sport and activity, but a genuine interest in the human body, its functions, and how it works. So I went to university in Bristol, and being British Asian with a northern accent, I very quickly became aware that I stood out. I was the only non-white face in a cohort of 110. And Bristol itself is a very, very culturally diverse place. But I instantly became aware of my identity as a British Asian man. And I knew that my skin color was not the norm. And as my sort of journey went, sort of developed, and then I started my working career as a junior physio, that feeling of standing out continued. And when I looked around, there was a real lack of role models in the AHP world. And as I mentioned earlier, Asian weddings being large, colourful affairs, they last days, they sometimes last weeks. And when I was planning my wedding, I went to speak to my manager at the time to ask for some annual leave. And when I explained what we were doing and the dates that I needed, the response was, "Oh, why couldn't you just be Church of England?" And at the time, I sort of brushed off the comment because I was very used to it, really. Growing up, you're very used to hearing things like that, and you just get on with it. But it's something that planted a seed inside me, and I decided I need to do more. I wasn't sure at the time what I needed to do, but I needed to do more. And we'll probably know that there's a real lack of equality and diversity training in our roles and in our organizations. But I came across the Stepping Up program through the Leadership Academy, which is a positive action program. And I went on this, and that again watered, and that seeds that I had from after that conversation with my line manager. And I went back to my organization after that, and I set up the BAME network that Vanessa now chairs. And it wasn't long after that COVID hit us. And COVID significantly impacted those from Black, Asian, and minority ethnic backgrounds, and an investigation was needed as to why this was the case. And I saw a role that was advertised, which I successfully applied for back in 2020. And so this is where we are now, or this is where I am now, as the race equality lead for the Hampshire and Isle of Wight ICS, and this role focuses on the race equality for both the NHS workforce, but also the wider local populations that we've got throughout Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And a large proportion of that work to now has focused on vaccine and vaccine equity, and ultimately led for me to me being on the national news, being interviewed by HIOW. And I think this, going back to my grandma, the photograph you saw, every day when she watches the news, and most days she sees HIOW on the news, and every time she sees him, she'll say, "Oh, that's the man that interviewed Leon." And now I also have taken on a role as the AHP BAME SAG chair. You know, the NHS, it loves an acronym, doesn't it? But the Strategic Advisory Group chair for the Southeast region of NHS England. And ultimately this involves me looking at the diversity amongst allied health professionals across the southeast of England, but also looking at how we can work alongside universities and increasing our representation and the challenges that are faced from people with different ethnic minority backgrounds, and how we can ultimately improve the diversity of the workforce to have that knock-on effects, because we know that a diverse workforce has positive outcomes for our diverse populations. So that's the snapshot of me, and this is just a photograph of me, slightly blurry, I apologize, but taken at Wellfest last year in Southampton with my two fantastic colleagues, Pavan on the right of the picture and Somali on the left. So I'll stop sharing now and hand back over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Leon. I love looking at pictures. That's my favorite. Yeah, no, wonderful. I'll just open it up to anybody in the audience if they've got any more thoughts or questions on anything that Leon's just shared. For me, I think it's quite a sobering journey, but it unravelled really quite nicely around really personal and like really joyful things. So I'll leave it to anyone that's got any thoughts or questions.
Just from me, Leon, thank you for sharing your story. I mean, what you've been through, obviously, some real hardships there. It'd be very easy for most people just to accept it and say nothing and move on. But the fact you've chosen to run with it positively and, you know, turn this into a positive opportunity is really inspiring. So thank you.
Thanks, Mayank. Appreciate that.
Hi, Leon. Just wanted to say, yeah, I echo the previous comments. During your journey, you know, all those comments that you had, you know, could you have just been Church of England, blah, blah, blah. Did you like report any of that? You know, all those microaggressions, or you just went on with your career? And
that particular comment I did report, and I spoke to my line manager's manager at the time and didn't really get a huge amount of support. I was basically told to just go and try and have a conversation with her and try and sort of level it out. It wasn't particularly helpful. I did go and have that conversation, but at the time, I was quite junior and didn't really feel like I had, looking back now and reflecting back now, really didn't have the support that I feel should have been offered to me. I received a formal apology and things, and just sort of moved on. I guess we all, you know, kind of moved on. But, you know, I've mentioned it today. It's still something that I do think about. Rarely, but it's still something that I do think about. So, but yeah, to answer your question, I did report it.
Just to follow up, I mean, this is never going to happen again. But if in your position right now, you know, being strategic advisor to the whole region, and if somebody, without knowing or deliberately, whatever, you know, they could be a member of some group, said that same thing again, what would you do now differently 10, 15 years later? Yeah,
really good question. I think there's a whole lot I would do differently. So I think speaking to a manager is important, but the response of that manager is more important, and what they decide to do with it. And every situation is different. But I think there's so much more that's available now in terms of health and well-being support. And some of the work that we've been involved in has ensured that the offers of health and well-being support are culturally appropriate offers as well. We're very used to, I think, putting health and well-being offers out there, which tend to be things like, you know, attend this yoga class at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon in a physio gym. And, you know, whilst that's great, it doesn't suit everybody. It's also signposting, I think, is important to things like freedom to speak up. I saw Jude's just come onto the call just now, which is great. Freedom to speak up is something that I'm a really big advocate for. It's so important to speak up, and it's so important to have a safe and confidential space, I think, to speak up as well. When it's difficult to bring that topic up in the more traditional routes.
Thanks.
We'll go to Pavan. You've got your hand up, and then there's just another question, Leon, in the chat box, but we'll let Pavan go first.
Thank you, Leon. You know, we've worked quite closely for quite a while now, a few years, and I've learned something new about you today and heard about your journey. So thank you for sharing that, and particularly the difficult aspects in your life. But clearly that has shaped who you are today and your journey and why you've come into these roles because of your lived experience. So thank you for sharing that. You said something in your career journey and your experiences about, you know, the messaging from our families, because I remember the same messaging: put your head down, work hard, you'll progress in your life. And I hear that across different communities when we talk to different colleagues, ethnic colleagues, who say the same thing. Yeah, I was told, buckle down, you have to work twice as hard as anybody else, particularly your white colleagues, to be noticed or progress. Do you think that's still the case now? You know, put your head down, work, or in terms of career progression, what do you think we should be focusing on that will aid us to move forward in our careers?
So I think it still is the case, and I still think that if you're from an ethnic minority background, you have to work harder. You have to put in the extra hours and go that extra mile to make a difference and to be counted and ultimately to be rewarded for it. And that just shows, you know, that there's still a significant educational difference in attainment from white colleagues to black colleagues in particular, less so with Asian colleagues. But there's definitely more that we need to do. And I think, you know, the work that you and I are involved in, you know, tackles a small aspect of that. And, you know, we focus on our NHS workforce. So we look at the recruitment processes. We look at trying to reduce the biases within the recruitment processes, because naturally we know, and the evidence shows, that we tend to recruit people who look like us and who talk like us and who've got the same lived experience and education experience that we've got. And if we've got, for example, you know, we're talking about recruitment, if we've got all white recruitment panels, you will naturally gravitate to that person who will share, who you have that sort of commonality with. But there's so much more that we need to do and that we can do, and things that we are doing at the moment with our positive action programs. You know, I mentioned the Stepping Up program being a real pivotal sort of part of my career and being the springboard of where I am now. And I certainly wouldn't have been doing the role that I'm doing, moving out of a clinical role into this non-clinical role without having been on that Stepping Up program. So there's more we can do. There's absolutely more we can do, and it's a journey that we're all on together with our white colleagues, and we can't do it without our white allies. Can't stress that enough. We can't underestimate the power of white allies in the work that we're doing.
Thanks, Leon. We've got a question in the chat from Amira, and it's quite, I think it's off the back of what you were just saying. It's, what's your advice? Well, the comment is, great presentation, thanks for sharing. What's your advice for someone who wants to get into a career in equality, diversity and inclusivity type roles?
Thanks, Amira. So I think if you want to get into an EDI career, I think talking to people who are already in that space is a really good place to start. You know, having a genuine interest and passion in what you want to do and what you want to achieve is always, you know, is always helpful. But having a read around your own organization's data, look at the RES data, look at the WDES data, which is all available publicly. So the RES data is the Workforce Race Equality Standard, which compares the experiences of white colleagues and people from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. And then you've got the WDES, which is the same, but for disabled staff as well. So have a look at those in your own organizations as well.
Thank you. And then one more hand. Is it Ed?
Yes, that's me. It's kind of slightly related to that. And, you know, I wouldn't want to put anybody off of moving into an EDI role if that's their passion. But I just wonder, Leon, if you feel that to some extent there's still a culture that if you come from a minority ethnic background, then it's an equality role that you need to get into. Do you think we're doing enough to encourage people from minority ethnic backgrounds to get into whatever role it is that they feel that they can play the biggest pie in the organisation?
Yeah, we still see disparities when we look at the upper echelons of our organizations. We know and we can see that they don't reflect the workforce or the populations that we serve. So there still is a gap there. And the Snowy White Peaks report from quite a number of years ago now, and that was written by Roger Klein, is something that I'd really sort of recommend everybody to go and Google. And it's a real honest snapshot of how things are in the NHS. As I said, it's a few years old, but it still absolutely is relevant to what we see today.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Leon, and thanks, Ed. Is there any more comments or thoughts or anything? We've got a couple of minutes and we'll have our next speaker, Danny, at 1 o'clock. George?
Thank you. Leon, listening to you and mentioning about the allyship word, I'm sure that word is quite new in the recent years. I'm just wondering about you in your journey growing up in this country. How has allyship changed over the years? From your school days to your work days now. Do you see the change? Yeah.
I think allyship has always been there, and probably just not formally recognised. Growing up, I had some fantastic white allies, school colleagues, teachers who would really give me opportunities. And for that, I am forever grateful. And that has absolutely carried on throughout my education and into my career. I wouldn't be where I am without, fantastic support of allies behind me. You're right, allyship has been a term which has become much more widely used over the last few years. And I guess that role's been formalized a little bit more. But I think it's important to note that allyship just doesn't fall into the race category. There's allyship across, I'm an ally for all of my colleagues across all the other protected characteristics as well. So it doesn't matter who you are, whether you've got a protected characteristic or not, you can absolutely be an ally. And we've got allyship programs running as well. I must just add this and plug these sessions. So we've got system-wide allyship sessions that are running. They're being hosted by Saab at Southern Health. These are really great sessions, and we can put the details or the dates and times into the chat in a moment. But yeah, please do come along.
Is there anything else, Leon, that you want to plug whilst you've got this platform, this space, this audience?
In terms of plugging, no, I don't think so. Allyship sessions, I know Pavan's going to talk a little bit about some of the other work that we're doing a bit later on. But Pavan and I are in quite a unique role. There aren't many people across the NHS who have the same role that we're involved in. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, or you want to come and shadow us or anything like that, we're more than happy to talk to you. Please just get in touch. Oh, and I can see Saab's just put the information or put her email in there about to get in touch about allyship, actually. So thank you, Saab. Back to you in the studio, Vanessa.
No, I feel like who Pim. You have to tell your family I've replaced him. Yeah, again, just my own reflections. I think a really nice presentation. Thank you, Leon. Really nice how it unravelled. So it was your career journey wrapped in things that are important to you, and it's lovely just to see you as I always see you as the founding father of the network at Hampshire Hospitals. So it's nice just to see you as a human with your sisters, with your granddad, little Leon with a cricket bat. So I think for me that was really special. Thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Pavan, any comments, or just waiting for?
I don't think Danny's here yet, is he? Danny, if you're here. Okay, so he might not be here yet. No, I just think thank you for sharing everything, Leon, and talking about the work that we'll be doing. Maybe as we wait for Danny to come, I might weave in some of the stuff, the programs. Leon and I actually were both on the same Stepping Up program. We never met each other before, so that was a wonderful experience to go. And we often reflect on that program. But I think that's what actually the learning we took away from the Stepping Up program is something that we said we wanted to bring here across Hampshire and Isle of Wight, and we tried to procure the Stepping Up program, which isn't running at the moment through Leadership Academy. So we decided we'll try and do something similar, and with funding we do have the Rising Tide, of which cohort 3 will be completed on Thursday. So that there were 3 cohorts run across the system, and there were 2 for bands 5 to 7 specifically for our ethnic minority colleagues, and there was there were all 3 of them were 5 to 7, weren't they, Leon? And we had another for called BAME Leadership Development, that's specifically for bands 8A and above. So, and there are people on this call, some of them who may have been on some of those programs, but that's just to provide an opportunity to actually have the experience of stepping up and get people thinking of their careers, hence this webinar today with a career panel. And that's one of the things that we're involved in. And I'm waffling because I'm looking for Danny to try and fill time in, but is he here? Do we know?
I wonder if you want to do your other slides, Pavan, whilst we wait for Danny.
Okay, yeah, I'll because I had 5 minutes at the end, so I'll do the slide. So thank you, Leon. That's a good way of using some of the time well. I have a slide here because it was an ideal opportunity just to talk really quickly about the COVID vaccine and the flu vaccine with you all. We know that COVID obviously and flu can be serious illnesses, especially for those older and vulnerable in our societies or who have certain health conditions. And we know the vaccine is effective and safe to protect against these viruses. We know that there will be a seasonal COVID-19 vaccine in the autumn to help protect from COVID and flu. And we're waiting further information from NHSC around that in terms of rollout. But what I wanted to flag is we know there's still lots of misconceptions, misunderstandings, worries amongst communities and amongst our colleagues about the COVID vaccination. So what I wanted to bring to people's attention is, while we're waiting for further information and before the beginning of the seasonal vaccines coming through, if you hear of anything or have any concerns yourself, there is a Hampshire and Isle of Wight COVID vaccination helpline, and the number is there, which is open 9 to 5 on a Monday to Friday. They have information in different languages, including language support. So it was an ideal opportunity to share this with you all if you don't know of it already. And please ask that. I mean, Leon and I see our colleagues, NHS colleagues, are our population and population in our workforce too. So please share this information with your families, with your through your professional networks and your communities, especially as you'd be linked to all your communities, just to have those conversations about COVID and their thoughts. And if people have got reservations, or if you're hearing misconceptions or myths, they can be directed to a source of support. Obviously, there's pharmacists and GP practices and NHS colleagues everywhere who may be able to help too. But just wanted to raise that with you in preparation for the autumn booster. And I'll stop sharing at this point. And do we have Danny?
Don't think Danny's quite here yet, Pavan. I might have missed him, but if he's here, please just announce yourself.
Okay, maybe we go to the next speaker and then we'll pick up with Danny when he's back.
Wonderful. So our next speaker is Prabha. I'm especially proud because Prabha is one of our student nurses on placement with us at Hampshire Hospitals.
Hi, so my full name is Prabha Chamling Ranahosarai, but I go for Prabha Rai because that's more easier. So I'm a second year nursing student and I come from Nepal. So I spent, I wouldn't say most of my childhood, well, yes, most of my childhood in Nepal, but I moved here when I was 12 years old. And I'm from within Nepal, there's many tribes as well. Yeah. And I come from a Rai tribe, which is I wouldn't say different, but it's sort of their culture and the tradition is sort of different from everyone else. So the reason I moved here was because my dad was in a Gorkha, so he was in a military, British military, and through that he got a settlement in here, so he decided to move the whole family. So I studied my school elementary here. I went to college here as well, and I'm currently studying in university, Southampton, to be specific. And
Oh, Prabha, you're just on mute. That's better.
Hiya.
That's better.
Was I on mute the whole time?
No.
Okay, sorry. So my nursing career started sort of I just went along with my studies. So in college I was studying in school I was studying health and social, and so I was studying health and social in college as well. So at the end of my second year, I had a conversation with my career advisor, and they were really helpful in deciding what sort of a pathway I can take, and they kind of suggested in looking into a health sector. And I was quite interested in nursing because my family doesn't have any sort of someone from health, medical stuff, so I was kind of interested being the first one from the family, so I kind of choose the pathway to get into nursing. So the way we keep our culture and my traditional alive is usually we have a big community here in UK, and we usually continue with our cultural festivals and all that. So during October, September, that is when most of our festival happens, and we keep it alive through celebrating it and just having just mesmerizing the festival and the traditional within it. So, and yes, that's all for me. So I'm in the second year, so I'm still building on my career. But outside nursing, I also work as a HCA, bank HCA within the trust. So, and through that, I have developed more skills and insights of what sort of a hospital setting is, and extra, I work in a retail as well, the part-time as well. So through that, so multitasking. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was lovely to hear. Round of applause all the way round. Look, I think we'll go straight to the questions. Oh, I can't see who's got that. I can see your hand, but I can't see where it's coming from. Please just shout.
I think that's Mayank would like to ask a question.
Go for it.
That's my mistake. Apologies. Put my hand down. Sorry. Really enjoyed the talk. Thank you, brother. Sorry.
I think yeah, I'd just like to say a really big well done as a second year student nurse. I know these arenas can be quite daunting, and we don't always spotlight our learners as much as we should. So really just big thank you and big well done to just for being here and being brave enough to share your story. Yeah, I don't want to waffle too much. Any other thoughts or questions for this special young lady?
Just keep doing what you're doing, I think, and don't burn the candle at all three ends is what I'd say to you.
Yeah, we need our future workforce like fit and healthy.
Yeah.
So really good advice. Van?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to just echo what was said. I mean, you're doing a huge amount of, you're doing on lots of different things. What do you do? How do you find time to relax and do things that different activities and things?
Luckily, I have luckily I have quite a good assessor and my manager as well. So and the HCA is a bank as well. So I choose when I want to go in and stuff. And I do know my limits. So if I know that I'm going to be busy this week and that I will not have, I need the day off, then I call ahead to my manager saying like, oh, I might need a day off from my retail work and maybe cancel my shift as a HCA. And the bank nurses are quite good with me as well, so I do communicate with them. So through that, I have managed to have a day off here and there.
Excellent, that's great. Thank you.
Ray, I don't know if you keep an eye on the chat, but maybe it's something for you to come back and reflect on. There's loads of lovely, really supportive comments in the chat as well, which I'm sure you can use towards your placement assessment. Yeah. Oh, one more question. Is it Abraham or?
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
Anand. I had two questions actually. One was there was a lot of background noise, so I missed. What were the common festivals that you was it Diwali or I heard as Eid that you celebrate?
No, so I celebrate Dasai and Paitika. So it's sort of it's different, but it's Hindu. It's a Hindu festival, but it's similar to, I want to say, in India, but with the culture and the traditional makes it so much different. And we kind of have like customized it to our own culture and the country as its own. So yeah, it's sort of different, but it comes from a Hindu, yes.
The other question was about your dad. I know lot of people, Gorkha soldiers have struggled getting their settlement and pension. I don't know how easy it was for him or how hard it was. And do you know anything about his journey?
Well, my dad, so I come from a military family. So my great grandfather and my grandfather was in the military as well. So from what I know, that it was not an easy journey for him as well, because back home, being in Gorkha is sort of is a pride to have, and also there is a lot of competition as well. So for my dad, it was definitely hard, and getting to, I don't know, maybe there was 1,000 application and only 100 of them getting chosen. So it was definitely hard for him. But so as a settlement as well, they had to really fight for the settlement as well against their obviously the white colleague as well, because obviously they are fighting for the same country, but there's still a debate about not recognizing our effort, like obviously for my country, and there is still lots of debate and lot of about the discrimination within a military, stuff. But there's still work going on. But the settlement wasn't an easy journey for my dad as well. He really had to fight for it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. I think we've got one more hand, and I think Danny's here. So we'll answer this last question, then we'll hand over to Danny for his journey, his story.
Hi there. I just put my hand up Prabhat, if I may, I just wanted to talk about the village festival that we celebrate in Nepal. So it's Dasai, like Prabhat said, which is very much like Navaratri, what Indian people celebrate, where we worship Goddess Durga for 9 days. And on the 10th day, we seek blessings from our elders. Like we go to people's house and we receive something called tika, which is like a red it's a special thing made out of rice and powder, isn't it, Prabha? And we have like something called jamara, which is like a flower or a bit of a grass that we take. That's like a blessing we have from our elders. And Baitika is celebrated during Deepavali, which is Diwali. And Baitika is when we share and celebrate the bond between brother and sister. So sorry, Prabha, I just thought I wanted to explain it to everybody, if that's all right with you. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
No, that's good. Yes. Well, I'm still, to be fair, the festival usually is held by my mum. So a lot of the customs, my mum does it. So I'm still new to, continuing the festival, the culture. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks for helping her out there. Danny, lovely to have you. Over to you just to share your story. Have you got any slides or anything that you need to show? Or
No, just a verbal update. So thanks, Vanessa. And thank you everybody for inviting me. And I can tell that whilst I was in another meeting, there's been quite rich conversation, certainly through the chat, through all the presentations and discussions you've been having. So it sounds like a good session that's been had by everybody. But just talk a little bit about my story. So I'm Danny HIOW. I'm the Chief People Officer for the ICB, the Integrated Care Board for Hampshire and the Isle of Wight. And so just over the next couple of minutes, I'll talk you through what I've been doing over the last 25 years in the NHS. But I guess the journey started some time ago, really, in terms of, why the NHS, why HR, and why have I stayed so long? So I, straight from university, joined the NHS. But I have a lot of people when I was much younger who'd been in the NHS as either doctors, GPs, therapists. My mum's a nurse by background. So, spent lots of time in clinical settings. I'm sure my summer holidays when I was very young, for whatever reason, we seemed to be going to the hospital to meet patients or friends. And those were the days where people just used to rock up and visit patients. So I certainly, at a very early stage in my life, as a youngster, what became quite familiar with hospitals, clinical settings, the NHS, definitely. And I think there was a point in time when just about everybody in my household at one point had something to do with the NHS. So, so it's not surprising that I ended up in the NHS, and I've had a long career in the NHS. But I also, just to add to that, my university degree dissertation was on the NHS. It was at a point in time when trusts were becoming trusts. There were internal markets. There was the move away from health authorities, and as I look on screen, probably no one looks young enough to remember any of those days. But so again, you can see that there was always a pull, this magnetic pull towards the NHS. So some 25 years ago, I joined and wasn't looking to go into HR. I was looking to become a general manager in the NHS, and I started life working in the community trust, almost like as a placement year. Just doing general administration work. It was working across health centres in Croydon, and I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the atmosphere. I enjoyed the work I was doing, the people particularly, and then I went on to become a bed manager. And obviously you can't see me fully on screen, but I was obviously much more slimmer and fitter because I walked the hospital and wards of St George's every day, several times over, and of course I was younger, and it was an enjoyable job. And what that job did for me was put me in quite a profile position, understanding the mechanics of an acute hospital, how it worked, about bed management, how things operate, how things work. But I very quickly felt that that wasn't a job that I certainly wanted to do, and I know lots of people do it year in, year out, but it wasn't a job I wanted to do forever. It was about gaining experience and exposure to different environments. And while I was at St George's, somebody said, and I obviously had conversations. I'd undertaken elements of people management, HR, whilst I was at university. And so somebody said, well, why don't you go and do some work in the HR function at St George's and see what it's like? And I did the odd couple of days just learning and understanding, and an opening came about. So I was quite fortunate as an HR advisor working in medical staffing. And I spent 12 months there really honing my, well, not honing, but learning about HR, working with people who are technically very good, very sound, and felt, well, I could really build a career here. I could really do something. So I went off to do the CIPD professional qualifications. Unfortunately, I was only on a 12-month fixed term contract at that time, and they weren't sponsoring me for the CIPD, so I was funding it myself. But I felt it was a good investment, and I have no idea whether they were going to extend my contract. But I felt I should go into a more generous HR role, and gosh, I wonder what would have happened, where I would have been. But these were the days where there weren't electronic application forms. You have to fill them in. I wasn't sure if I really wanted to apply for this job. It was in Hammersmith. It was for working for an organisation called Riverside, which doesn't exist any longer. And as the story goes, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to or not. Anyway, I had to drive there, stick the application under the door. It was late in the night, just to get it in on time, but I did. I then was daunted by the fact that there was only 2 jobs going, and 15 candidates turned up for interview. But lo and behold, I was one of the successful candidates, and I successfully got the job. And it was probably the platform that kind of really sort of got me going, because I spent 2 years working mental health, really cut my teeth on employee relations, HR, working in a big HR function. And then from there, I wanted to kind of develop. I wanted to obviously gain promotion, and I went for the next 7 years to work back into an acute environment, which I think has always been my passion, is the acute environment, acute hospital. So in Croydon, so where I went there as an HR manager. I then became the deputy director of HR, and while I was doing the deputy director job, my boss left, and I was elevated to becoming the director of HR. And so this was about 2005, 2006, 7 time. And I have to say, and this is just my advice, when people offer you the opportunity, you always take the opportunity, but think it through about how I'll do the job. Do I have the experience? Have I been exposed to these settings? And I have to say, it was a very steep learning curve. It was a tough environment, and I didn't have all the skills, the knowledge or experience to go and do that job, but I worked hard at it, and I did it for 13 months or so, and whilst it wasn't easy, it was a tough experience. I've always kept that in my locker. I've always thought about, what could I have done different? And I also think about every job I go to, how do I prepare for it? How do I plan for it? And there were a number of leadership changes at that time, so change of CEO. So there was a point in time where I needed to go back to my old job, and I think they recruited somebody else in on secondment, and so not too long after that I decided I wanted to continue my journey, but I didn't want to be a director. I wanted to get more exposure at a deputy director level, so I went to work in Bromley hospitals and then South London Healthcare, where I covered the director job on a few occasions, and I also led a big organizational restructuring program over a number of years there. So all the time I was, aiming to become a director in the NHS, but trying to get as much skills and experience and knowledge, building on my experience when I was first asked to act up. And I then went on to another NHS trust in Surrey, where I acted up as the director before taking the leap of faith and substantially becoming well, it used to be called workforce director in those days, not chief people officer, in Essex at Basildon Hospital. We had a fantastic time, loads of good pieces of work, but again, a very tough, difficult environment, an environment that was moving into a group model and into merger. And in 2019, I became the chief people officer for 3 hospital trusts in Essex, Basildon, Southend, and Mid Essex. It's called Broomfield Hospitals, which is in the Chelmsford area, if you know that area well. And then in 2020, in the middle of a global pandemic, we merged, and I became the chief people officer overall for the new organisation. And then, of course, as some of you will know, in May this year, after 23 consecutive years working in acute hospitals, I took this leap of faith to come to Hampshire and the Isle of Wight to work in the ICB. But what I would say along the way, just helpfully for colleagues, is I certainly always had the ambition, but it's important that you've got experience, skills, knowledge to do the job, alongside with hard work. But the thing I have always had is, certainly the last 10 or so years, coaches who have supported me. I've been fortunate to have, not always, definitely not always, but fairly good line managers. But the thing I work on most of all is building relationships with my executive colleagues, the people I work with, leaders across the organisation, because these jobs are not easy. Nobody's job is easy. Let's be honest. The NHS is a tricky, complex machinery to work in, and not having these relationships means that you've got no one to turn to, not just when it's difficult, but when you want counsel, when you want advice, when you want support. And the one thing I would urge you all on your career journey is, build strong teams, build good relationships. Coaching is important, and sometimes you'll be thrown in at the deep end. You can always say no, but always think that this is an experience, and what can it help you with on your next step. So always think about, where do I want to be, what are the things I need to do, and how do I go about obtaining it. And being a director is not for everybody, but whatever you choose to do, you also have to have vision and passion in doing it. So if you hate it, it won't be enjoyable. And I can certainly say that it's been tough. There's definitely been some tears along the way, but I can't say that I haven't enjoyed myself thoroughly, and I hope to continue to enjoy myself for the next 25 years. Hopefully it won't be another 25 years. So Vanessa, thank you. I've got to shoot off onto another call now, but I'm very happy to just take the odd question or two if anybody has got a couple of questions briefly.
Yeah, no, thank you, Danny. I was
Thanks,
very like, what's the word? Listening. Better word for listening. I'll see if anyone else has got any questions, and then I've probably just got one thought and one question. And then,
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
please
hi,
do.
Danny. I just want to ask a quick question before you run away, because I was really curious when you said this. They said there was a period when you were working somewhere for 12 months, and it was a steep learning curve, and you were thrown in the deep end. What exactly were you struggling with? Were you struggling with the relationships there? Was it a boring job? You know, what was it that made it harder?
So it was my first experience as an executive director, being part of an exec team, the board, and I just hadn't really had the exposure to working in that environment. Firstly, it was a tough team to work in. It was a challenging organisation. And I think the other problem was, there was, and that's the other thing, is if you step up, make sure you've got good, decent backfill for yourself. And I found myself trying to do my old job and my new job at the same time. And sometimes that's okay for 2-3 months because you've got a plan that somebody's going to come in. But there was no plan. I wasn't being allowed to get any backfill. And I think that didn't help me because I was then, trying to do everything, and probably not giving my best to the things that were the priority. And that's the other thing, is you've also got to be bold and say, actually, if I'm to be successful, these are things I need in place. And you won't get all of it. It's a negotiation. And I probably lacked that confidence in those days. So again, it was a confidence thing more than anything. It definitely wasn't a boring job. I can assure you that. Vanessa, did you want to ask your question and comment as well? And then I must shoot because I've got to jump on another call. I apologise for rushing off.
Yeah, definitely. So the comment is, what stuck out for me in what you're saying is just showcasing how wonderful the NHS is for all its flaws and media coverage and stuff. You've kind of demonstrated a full career from various roles. I don't want to say from the bottom to the top, but a full career. So it's just nice just to showcase our wonderful health service.
If it's helpful, sorry, Vanessa, if it's helpful, in those days the banding and grading structure was quite different when I joined the NHS, but it's probably the equivalent of today's Agenda for Change Band 4 role. So that's where I started, and lots of people come out of university with quite high expectations. I had to start somewhere, and that's where I started. So yeah.
And I guess the question off the back of that is, we had some talk earlier on how, as kind of ethnic minorities, we're taught that we have to work harder to get onto the same kind of level playing field. Is that something that you felt you did throughout your career? Did you feel like you had to work twice as hard to compete with?
So I haven't always felt that, no. I think I had to work hard to achieve where I've got to. There's no doubt about that. I've put in a lot of hours, and I've compromised on many other things, but I don't think it's because of coming from an ethnic minority background. A number of people and CEOs particularly have asked me, do I think that I've been disadvantaged? And I've always said, look, I don't know what I don't know. So I don't know if I've gone to interviews where I haven't been successful, and it's because of. But no, I don't think that that's the case. What I would say, and I definitely probably need to go in a moment, is when I started to go into senior HR roles in the NHS, and I used to go around to conferences and meetings, I definitely was in the minority. There was probably about 3 or 4 of us, certainly London based, who are in senior HR roles, who came from ethnic minority. Now today, there are you know, not hundreds, but there are certainly lots of highly talented, skilled people who are chief people officers up and down the country who do come from a ethnic minority background, and that helps to role model and say to people from these backgrounds, there is a route map for you, because I've done it and I've achieved it. But I have to say, when I was coming through the ranks, if you want to describe it like that, there weren't role models in that way. So, you know, that's why when I'm asked to come on to things like this, I'm keen to, because there was no one advocating or promoting to me. You could do it. It was just something I wanted to do. So, I'm always pleased to say to people there is a way to do really well within the NHS. Vanessa, on that note, because I've got to see somebody now on a Teams call. Would you all very kindly excuse me? But I'm always happy to come back again and tell you a different story if that's helpful. Yeah.
You may
Thank
be
you, Vanessa.
excused. Okay.
Appreciate
Take care. Have a good day.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Wonderful. So I think we've got a good 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so to hear from our last, I don't want to say last two because it's 2 out of 5, but I think next is Bhumika.
Yeah, hi,
Over
hello
to you.
everyone. I'll keep it short and sweet because I know we haven't got too much time. So my name is Bhumika Dagal. I work as transformation manager for Hampshire and Isle of Wight for the North and Mid Hampshire patch. So before I talk about my NHS journey, I would really like to talk about my country as well, because not many. So I come from Nepal, or Nepal, however you want to say it. So not many people know about it. It's a very small country wedged between China and India, like country of Lord Buddha, country of Mount Everest, country where the brave Gurkhas hailed from. So we've got a very rich culture, which is very distinct, but like, because we are majority of us are Hindu, so we have very similar festival, like our culture, like religion are very, very similar to Indian people. So my NHS career, before I start my NHS career, so I came over to England after my schooling. Well, I was sent over to England because there was a huge political instability in Nepal, and my parents felt we wouldn't be safe. So we left my parents, like my siblings and I, we were sent over to England while we were young, around schooling age. And it was very difficult then because we had everything and all of a sudden we had to be scattered around the world because of the way our country was. But nevertheless, you know, we studied, we did well, and it was like really my passion to work for the NHS, because I come from such a country, and don't quote me on that, but I think in Nepal, the health sector, the healthcare is not very great. And if I'm not mistaken, the government spent £68, not even pounds, $68 per year on a person on a health. So it's very poor. And it was, as soon as I got here, I did my university and everything, my college. It was almost like I really wanted to work for the NHS, but not in a clinical capacity, because everyone is like either doctors, nurses from Nepalese background, but you don't really see people who've like gone on to the management roles. So I started in the acute in Royal Surrey in Guildford many years ago in 2007. And since then, you know, I've come so far, but I've had to have a lot of little breaks in between. Like, you know, I had to go back to Nepal to get married. Then I had children. And at one stage, I moved back to Nepal because I thought, you know, England wasn't for me. Then I couldn't. I came back. And since then, I have been in the NHS, and I was fortunate enough to be in the NHS. And it always hasn't been easy. But I think, like what Danny said earlier, I have had very good allies. My line managers have been absolutely wonderful, always pushing me forward, always telling me to go for what I want to go. Like, they have helped me with my career progression. And at the moment, when I look back at when I came back from Nepal and joined NHS back in 2019 to now, my career trajectory has been in upwards, and I would like to carry on, but it doesn't come with some hard games, like, you know, when you go to a meeting, you feel like you're not heard, or when you speak, you're almost invisible. But I'm working hard to get where I am, and I feel absolutely passionate about, like, you know, how we are very backwards in terms of health. Like, Nepalese communities are not very much represented in the whole NHS workforce, and I would like people to see, like, I always want to, like, aspire to become a role models for others who would like to come and work in the NHS, not in a clinical capacity, but in a non-clinical capacity as well, because there is like it's a great place to be, but I don't think we just always see that. So I think I'll leave it there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Oh, wonderful. That felt very short, very sweet, very straight to the point. We're not messing around here. Any questions, comments? Leon?
Thanks, Bhumika. It's a really interesting story. And you mentioned coming over to England when you were at school age. What age were you?
Oh my God, Leon, I think I joined year 9. So
Right,
yeah.
Quite late on. And how was your English?
It was all right. Oh my God, I could tell you some stories. It was like, for first 3-4 months, no one will sit with me, no one will eat with me. And by 4th month, it was really, really good. And there is a very interesting story that I would like to share with you guys. It was not, so I came back. I've done a lot of backwards and forwards in my life between Nepal and England, but I think I came back in 2015 for good. And I was working for a private company. Because I live in a very white dominated little village in Hampshire, and I used to work not very far from Basingstoke. It was a private run business, and so my father-in-law passed away, and because we are Brahmins, you've got all this caste and all that in Nepal as well. So I come from a Brahmin background, which means our mourning period is really long, 13 days leave. And as a daughter-in-law, it's almost like expected of you to go and participate in everything. So my employer at the time did not let me go. He was like, if you go, you leave your job and go. And I felt that was really, really, like, a big discrimination. So what I did was I said, okay, I left the job. I went back. I had to do what I had to do. So I went and did that thing, like pay my respect to my father-in-law. And obviously it was more than 13 days, you can't just go for that period. I stayed there for like about 21 days. And there was a letter saying that I had been sacked from the job. But then I just thought, I had emailed them before I went away to say I am not coming back, but they chose to ignore that email, and they just to make me feel bad, they sent a letter to my home saying don't bother coming back. And yeah, that wasn't very nice. And I just thought they were like, despite of me saying to them so many times about my religion, culture, like, I even gave them links to read on how culture can be very different. You might be Hindu, but what you do is very different. But they did not listen, and that was just like, just I was glad I didn't work for them. And as it happens, I applied for this. I applied for a job within Frimley ICB, and I got the job. So there was not looking back for me, and I'm glad I did. And since then, I worked in Frimley for a few years. Then I came over to North and Mid Hampshire. I think it will be 3 years in April. So yeah, it hasn't been too bad within the NHS for me, but it's just overall I've had like bits of like, knockbacks here and there. Thank you.
Hi, Bhumika, this might
Hi.
be pain. Hi. This might be painful for you to remember, but you said in year 9 kids wouldn't sit with you for 4 months.
Yeah, 3-4 months, because I joined in September, so I only made good friendship after Christmas, like January, February time. Yeah.
Yeah, especially I'm going through that with my kids. I've got twins who are in year 9, and they all have their cliques and their gangs. Once they are set,
it's very difficult.
It's very, very difficult to break in. So it wasn't particular that because you were from a foreign country, or it wasn't overt.
Probably
racism?
because I did not speak the way they did, and it was a very there was hardly anybody from any other backgrounds, and there had been occasions when my brother and sister and I would be walking down the road and they would say some nasty words to us, but we just chose to ignore it. And I still live in the same place, not very far from where I was, and it's so multicultural now, and it's really lovely. And you know what really makes me happy is like my kids don't have to go through any of that because they just don't see any of that, so which makes me really happy.
Oh, thank you for sharing. I think racism is it's really horrible. It just hits differently, doesn't it? So thank you for just talking about like just racism in one of its forms. Again, really sobering. But one more question, and then we'll move on to our final panel member, Barbara.
It's not really a question. I just want to add something the Bhumika said. So I moved here also, you know, I start off my elementary school, year 7, and I moved here like 2013-ish. So I think the time has changed. I think the kids are more aware of the different culture, different races, you know, because for me, the experience was slightly different. So they were more intrigued that I was from Nepal. So they wanted to know what's it like, you know, the culture, the school there. So they were very, they were very interested in me. So, but I wouldn't say I made a lot of friends, but the struggle Bhumika had, I think I didn't go through. I think because by then there was a lot of changes and they were more aware of it. So yeah.
Thank you
Oh,
for
thank
sharing,
you.
Prabha. Yeah, I think I feel really happy hearing that because, you know, 20 years down the line, you didn't really have to go through that. And that makes me really happy that things are changing and people are changing and they're more accepting.
Yeah, definitely. I think the media is doing their job. And I think you know, the kids are more aware of these things as well. And a lot of the protests and all of these are actually helping the younger generation to be more, you know, aware of these sort of things. Yeah.
Agreed. Thank you so much. Yeah, last but not least, off you go.
Okay. Hello, I'm just trying to get my slides up, so bear with me. Can you see my slides? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So last but hopefully not least, thank you very much, team. It's been really inspiring hearing everyone's story, and hopefully whatever I have to say here will also fit into what you've been hearing. So I'm Mayank. I'm a diabetes consultant here down in Southampton, not a million miles from the HHFT neck of the woods. And it's really lovely that Leon and Pawan asked me to take part in this. So thank you very much. So essentially, where does my story start? So why have I got a slide of Indiana Jones? Okay, so I guess for me, as a man of a certain age, having watched this guy grow up over the last 40 years, it made me think about my own journey a little bit. So obviously I've just watched his latest big screen outing, and you know, he's been doing this for 40 years. So I thought, gosh, 40 years is actually quite a long time. So what have I done in 40 years? So what am I going to try and talk to you about is, rather than Indiana Jones, it's about Dr. Indian Patel and my diabetes destiny, about where I've kind of got to where I am in terms of diabetes and where I sort of ended up where I am currently. Okay, so my story began in the late 1950s. So my dad Bhaskar came across to England from Kenya. This was a time when, I think from his stories from the early days, very anxious, nervous, leaving his homeland, as it were, to start a whole new life somewhere else. Literally came to England, one suitcase. You've heard these sort of stories before, I'm sure. One suitcase, 3 pairs of trousers, 2 shirts, never used a telephone before. You know, the stuff we all take for granted in 2023. You know, it's terrifying when you hear these things back. And then he trained to be a pharmacist at the London School of Pharmacy. And for those that know it, he went to work in his own pharmacy in southwest London at a place called Streatham, where he worked very hard. You know, and a 6.5-day week was not unusual for my dad. He'd have, if he was lucky, perhaps 3 to 4 weeks off a year, if that was the deal. Self-employed, so very mindful of the need to support the family, provide for the family, and obviously it meant working long hours on his feet in the pharmacy. A few years later, through arranged marriage, Mum came across from Ahmedabad in India in the early 1960s. And then at some point in the late 60s, early 70s, my sister and I landed on planet Earth. And here we are. So for me, you know, growing up, medicine was not something I was immediately drawn to. It came quite for me a bit later, actually. So I took an interest in medicine biology when I was at school, did some work experience. Dad was a pharmacist. So that idea of, as Leon alluded to earlier, about hard work ethic was already instilled in me. So I took that and ran with it, did some work experience. And for me, I felt medicine for me was something I could see myself doing, more of a natural fit. So I applied to medical school, got a place in Southampton, landed here in 1990, and again, first time I'd left the big city really. So me and my 2 suitcases, I think it was, in Southampton, hall of residence, you know, 2 saucepans, self-catering. Oh my God, what was I doing? But I left home to give it a go. And again, culturally, not overly diverse, I'll be honest, but equally, I never felt self-conscious of other Asian students in my year as well. So we gelled, we integrated, we were diverse. It was all good fun. And over the course of training as a junior doctor from 1995 onwards, I took an interest in diabetes, where I sort of would see diabetes in different clinical settings, in different departments, on different wards, etc. So back in 2001, I began specialist training across Hampshire, rotating through places like Bath, Salisbury, again, very sort of white, not very diverse areas, but with hindsight, always made to feel very welcome, luckily. I don't recall any particular incidents or microaggressive behaviour. It may have been there, maybe I was naive, but I don't recall feeling, you know, vulnerable or not included, as it were, back, and that was, you know, some years ago. And then back in 2008, got the job in Southampton, and here I am. And in terms of what makes people tick, we've all got different drives. We've heard some really inspiring stories. For me, I guess it's just a sense of, do I enjoy what I do? And on my watch, can I sort of make a difference best I can? Which sounds, I know, really worthy, but it's what I'm trying to achieve, really. And diabetes, you know, it now affects 5 million adults in the UK. There's never going to be enough specialists in diabetes to see every single person who lives with diabetes. So a critical part of my job, which is not necessarily in the contract, it's just something I really enjoy doing, is to be passionate about educating about diabetes in different forms and different guises, which I'll come back to. So I can't see everybody, but I feel I can still contribute and help others who live with diabetes or those who manage or care for those with diabetes somehow. So in terms of picking up what Leon was touching on, so COVID was a massive challenge for all of us, you know, and that data that emerged fairly early on about the marked morbidity mortality disconnect with our ethnic groups and outcomes was terrifying. You know, this was me wearing a full perso hazmat type suit working on a COVID ward at the time. So you can imagine how kind of anxiety inducing that was. But I felt out of my sense of duty, I had something to commit to and do. And so with the right support and network around me, great colleagues, we all just got on with it. This was the task at hand, to look after people with COVID, this brand new disease in the world. We just kind of got on with it. Along with that was a welcome distraction. I was invited to be part of a group of diabetes specialists nationally who drafted some guidelines on managing COVID and diabetes related issues. That was a good welcome thing to be involved in, and again, very humble to be asked to do that. And from that point on, I guess, increasingly, as you've all been alluding to, there's a need to raise awareness and help our seldom heard families and friends and colleagues to with their challenges best we can. So for me, this kind of kickstarted a renewed personal focus, the desire to try and help from a diabetes perspective with that wider community setting and group as needed. And what's really nice in the world of diabetes, in case you're not aware, is that nationally there are various very high-rolling, high-level individuals who work in the field of diabetes, having really eminent national roles. So, for example, our national diabetes director is a chap called Jonathan Vallabhji, so from Asian background. The type 1 diabetes lead nationally is Professor Partha Kar. So again, we have people from diverse backgrounds in very senior positions in the diabetes arena, which is really, really inspiring and humbling, of course, to be part of that. And part of my educational offering, again, so something I've been involved in a few projects. Again, all of this is done off the clock, not in working hours. It's just something I really enjoy doing, and I try and bring a bit of myself into these things. And if I enjoy doing it, I must be doing the right thing. So a few years ago, I created an app called Diabetes. This provides guidance for all healthcare professionals who want to use it for free around elements of diabetes management for their patients. In 2019, I put together this course with colleagues from the university, which is basically on a platform called Future Learn, which hosts a lot of wide variety of courses of free online learning. But something we were keen to champion was insulin specifically. So this course is called Understanding Insulin. And I believe after several runs since 2019, we've had about 10,000 international learners doing the course, which is amazing to be part of that, to watch that unfold over the last few years. And then one of my key passions, as per the Indiana Jones thing, is that since 2014, I've been involved in producing these type 1 diabetes comic books, which has been great fun. They're on this website, they're all free, and they cover different elements of living with type 1 diabetes. They're aimed at people with diabetes, their families, their friends, healthcare professionals, but all the way through, I hope you can see, I've really tried to instill the idea of diversity in the offering, because diabetes is not just a white disease. Lots of clapping, thank you, I feel very embarrassed, but thanks very much. It's not just a white offering diabetes, it affects people across the whole planet. So it's been really lovely to be able to do this work to kind of help that raise the profile of type 1 diabetes in a different way. And what's been even nicer is that for those of you who are Marvel or comic book fans, there's something called the Marvel multiverse. So we were inspired by that to create the Multi-One verse, as you can see. And this photograph on the left shows me with Professor Parthakar on the right. And at the bottom is a lady called Jaswinder Sethi, based in India. She's done some amazing work in India and created a movement called Diabestes. Outstanding bit of work. And I got to meet her this year in London at a meeting, which was fantastic. And what they've done, they've put together an Indian version comic book called Blue Light. That's volume 1. Do feel free to read it. It's online for free. And I believe their volume 2 goes live very soon. So we're really keen to bring others on board globally into type 1 diabetes space to tell their story, because it's not going to be the same as a UK based type 1 diabetes story, I'm sure. And then again, just nearly done, something I've been involved in, some virtual reality based education around type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes for healthcare professionals. This is all stuff I've loved doing. It's just different things, working with other groups, diverse groups of individuals who are equally enthused and passionate, which is what you need to make these things work. And then what's next? This is the sort of last bit of what I'm doing. So early this year, we launched this campaign in Southampton called Start with the Diabasics. This is essentially a way to get all HCPs to really feel empowered and confident in delivering the basic diabetes care needs of their patients. This is a highly prevalent disease. My very small team can't see every single person, but we want every patient to feel supported and cared for from a diabetes perspective. And as you can see from the visuals, we've sought to really ensure diversity of the workforce is represented, given that this is a project aimed at workforce. So want to make sure people feel represented if we're trying to get them on side to help us out. So going next, again, so meeting Leon and Pawan was inspiring for me not long ago. Happy to help the call to obviously support with diabetes-related issues at scale. So, for example, I do talks on Ramadan, Diwali, cultural celebration advice around food and sugary food and diabetes, dispelling myths, etc. is important. And, you know, again, helping to rebuild trust where confidence has been shaken through various historical issues around healthcare and things. And Leon mentioned the vaccine trust and that sort of thing. It's all really important we get everyone on board and back in the right place somehow. And for me, you know, there's a saying, I think, by Nietzsche, that which does not kill us makes us stronger. And absolutely, I'm really keen, as long as people are still here, happy to hear what I have to say or offer, I'll keep supporting the effort best I can. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you. And
yeah, wow. I don't have anything to say, which makes a change. So, you know, Pavan, you can fill my silence.
No, I just want to, first of all, thank you, Mike, because you have been a true champion. Whenever Leon and I have come to us to say, can you support X, Y, and Z, you have always been there. And now I understand what makes you tick because of your passion. Not that it didn't come through anyway, but I've seen your slides now and I can understand the comic books and all that stuff and where it comes from. So it's like a jigsaw in terms of who you are. But you've been an amazing champion, even today, to come forward and to share your journey with us, which has been really inspirational. And I just want to say thank you and keep going, because we need people like you to keep flying the flag and to keep pushing the cause and keep being there to give voice to our seldom heard communities, but also our workforce as well, in terms of being here and career progression. And hopefully people will see you as, this is what I can do, or these are the things I can do, and link in with my passions. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. It's very kind. Thank you. As I say, I think the critical thing to us is enjoying what I do, and I think that's so important. And if I can weave in popular culture or give people a reference to sort of link to something, it makes diabetes a bit less scary, perhaps. That's why I always try and weave in popular culture as an icebreaker, if you like, in anything I offer educationally. But thank you.
Yeah, Mayank, since we have you, can I ask a kind of question that overlaps between, the theme of the month and a purely clinical question? I don't know if we still have the answer. Why is it that type 2 diabetes is so endemic and epidemic in the South Asian? Is it the diet? Is it like genetic? Because, my family, I'm going to get type 2 diabetes. Like, I'm genetically loaded from both sides of my parents.
That's a good question. Thank you. So I think it's not fully understood, but Asian-wise, genetics do play a part, certainly. And even at lower body weight and BMI, the risk is increased, which is really worrying, but it's there. So the combination, some people believe of the genetic background, the gun is loaded, shall we say, metaphorically, and the combination of that plus environment, the wrong food, too much of the wrong food, not being physically active, etc. Something about that interaction is what seems to trigger. And what's really scary is we're seeing younger people now. We're seeing type 2 in children, Asian and white children, which is terrifying. So the more we can inspire everyone to be physically active as early as possible is really important part of this.
Thank you, Mike. Let me just see. Someone else has got their hand up.
Toyin?
Yeah, that's me. Thank you. Oh, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was really wow, actually. And all of us can see your passion. That passion really came true. And in absentia to Daniel, so thank you. One thing I took away was when Danny was talking, he said that it's good to be ambitious, but be interested in what you want to do, have passion for it, which clearly you really should. And he said, be well equipped that you know what you are doing, which actually showed through everything. But one thing that I really want to know that I'm yet to take away from this section is, what are the challenges, if there's any or there is any, and how did you overcome it? I'm sure everything is not smooth. I've gone through a lot, and I just want somebody to share. What is that thing that makes you think, that makes you just go beyond and above? Though you have the interest, you have that passion. What is that thing that makes you to break barrier and rise above? I want to know. I want to learn. That is why I'm here. Please share it with me.
I wish I could
Thank
honestly. Thank you. I wish I could say it in one answer. I mean, I'm not always. It's not been plain sailing, and like all of our stories. I was turned down for jobs when I was a trainee. I missed out on job interviews a couple of times. I didn't get the job for be a specialist trainee a couple of times, and that finally happened. And I think for me, entering the diabetes space, I think because diabetes is a particularly sexy disease, there's a real image problem. And I think perhaps because on the back of working with Partha, my national good friend, who also trained with me, I think because we saw opportunities, that things that weren't being done, weaving in our combined love of movies and nerdy stuff into the diabetes space, that for me was a bit kick-started a bit of interest, really, in terms of recognizing there's a platform for this sort of stuff. Not for everyone, it's just something different to offer somebody who's looking for something different. And things just seem to have evolved and run over time, which is great. And I think because I've got a bit of a reputation as being a bit of a doer and I can get something done, Partha comes to me with various projects and we share ideas and we deliver. And I think that's part of it. And I think this inner drive, where it comes from, it's really hard to pin down. I mean, perhaps thinking deeper, my dad passed away when I was 22. I was at university when my dad died, unfortunately. So I don't know if on some level I feel, he was a passionate, enthused, driven man. And does that stem from him? I'm not sure, but I just want to make sure on my watch, I look back and I have a legacy that I've worked that I'm proud of, but equally feel I've contributed to the greater system. So it's not just about me personally, it's about trying to deliver across the piece in ways that, with all these things that are shareable and free, of course. I'd never want to charge for any of these things, and people are welcome to use these resources as much as they want for free, of course.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Amazing. Vanessa, is there anything you'd like to add before?
No, I'm still quite speechless. But what I've taken away from that is just being creative with your messaging, and just having fun with whatever you're doing. I think it's really nice. Yeah, we ran over time. I'm a terrible facilitator, but it's nice to see that people are kind of, really engaged and haven't left us. So yeah, just a big thank you from me for everyone that's taken part and listened and presented. Anything kind of final parting thoughts, I guess, and then we'll close it down for a year.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for the time that you've taken out of work and out of your own personal time potentially to be here today. I hope that you've taken some nuggets of information away today, some key messages. Danny certainly said something about coaching, might be something about connections, passions, networking, connecting people on this call. If you've seen people that you thought, oh, that'd be interesting, or some of our speakers, I'm sure they wouldn't mind just people individually reaching out to them, or, just connecting with them. So please fill in our evaluation form. Huge thank you once again, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you to our wonderful presenters as well for your time and for your journeys and for sharing the information. Some difficult stories, but some really wonderful ones too. So thank you to everybody, and from Vanessa and I, thank you, and see you again soon.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to stop recording now.